Hi, everyone. Thank you, Misha. Thank you. I have some coffee. That's good. This is the beginning of the famous Rustaveli Avenue, and it's also the Liberty Square with the St. George obelisk in the heart of the roundabout. And this is the kind of the symbol of the 19th century Tbilisi, the prosperous center of the Caucasus, the city that started to grow outside of its walls. To the left side from here, you could, well, it's like you see the big city hall building, and there are some trees, and there is like a yellow building of 2 floors. This is actually where the wall would run, the wall of the old city. And there used to be one of the entrances to the old city. And up until 1830s, actually, there was almost nothing around, well, around the city walls, outside of the city walls. But starting from, well, let's say 1820s and further on, things started to change very quickly, and the big avenue would be built. It wasn't called Rustaveli Avenue, obviously, at that time, and that area needed, well, I would say needed bigger streets, wider streets, because Tbilisi, when it was made part of the Russian Empire in 1801, it was annexed. It was invaded, but it was made a big financial center because further on the oil would be discovered, and there was just a lot of investment because it was the city was located at the intersection of a lot of trade routes all the time. So that well, the Romanovs in general saw great potential in this newly annexed territories. And actually, up until 1850s, 1860s, the expansion to the Caucasus of the Russian Empire would be ongoing, and we'll be talking about it. I'm not really happy to speak about these things, but it's history, and well, all the big empires we have now, they it didn't come from nowhere, right? It's also the result of a lot of annexations, invasions, and all sorts of campaigns. What can I say? It is what it is. So this is the church that was built. Well, it's a Russian Orthodox church that was built just next to the Viceroy Palace that we're visiting tonight. As you know, the Soviets took down the church and built the current parliament building. The Viceroy Palace, well, was built. Originally, it was just a small makeshift building, right, made from just from makeshift materials, very small, very modest, like 2 rooms, 1 floor only. But very soon, they realized it wasn't enough, and also the new avenue that was built started looking really nicely, and it sort of became the symbol of the new Tbilisi, the modern Tbilisi, international city, trade center, economic heart of the Caucasus region. So there was needed a much bigger space. And eventually, after several revampings, several redecorations, the current building was constructed in the end of the 1860s by Otto Simonsen, a German architect. And there were a lot of German architects, a lot of Germans living in Tbilisi anyway. So Tbilisi indeed became international city, the big international center, very cosmopolitan, and it 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 started exactly from Tbilisi. Okay, let me just turn down the volume. A second. Yeah. So uh, when you visited Tbilisi, let's say if you found yourself in Tbilisi somewhat in the 1850s, 1860s, well, you would be really, really confused. You wouldn't actually know where you were, because it would feel both very Asian and very European. There were still a lot of old buildings that looked just, well, that looked very, very oriental. And then all of a sudden you would see this European architecture. It would be really, really mind-boggling. It would be quite confusing, and it still is. I mean, now we are used to it and we love it. We appreciate the diversity. Back in the days, well, yeah, it was really surprising, and that's what startled a lot of visitors, and that what made other people visit. Exactly at that time, mid 19th century, Tbilisi became a big tourist destination. There were a lot of travel books that were printed in Europe. They were printed in France and Germany um, about Tiflis. And well, with the with the railroad constructed for not for tourism purposes, obviously, but to transport uh, oil. Obviously, other areas of Georgia would become more accessible, and the Georgia as a travel destination would become even more attractive for tourists. So, but the heart of the city, I mean, the administrative heart of the city, since Georgia still was part of the Russian Empire, it had to report to the Romanovs, right? And the Romanovs had to appoint someone to be in charge of the city and country within the empire. So there was this Viceroy Palace was exactly that center, operational center, and the Viceroy Palace was really a palace. I'm kind of summing everything up, and we are looking at the rooms that we have covered so far. And this is the final episode, so it's not really so much left. So the White Hall was the biggest. It was the place where the official gatherings took place. Whenever Romanovs visited the Caucasus, not necessarily the monarchs, but also the Grand Dukes. A lot of Romanov Grand Dukes were heads of various army regiments and having there was a big military outpost in the Caucasus. And again, as I said, up until 1860s, the wars, the expansion wars in the Caucasus would be ongoing and horrible. And Tbilisi was kind of the center of it. Tbilisi was the place where the all the operations were controlled from. It was like a big military outpost and the headquarters of the commandment in the region. So the White Hall, also a lot of parties took place there, a lot of dancing, and yes, well, the Tbilisi aristocracy was also invited, of course. So Tbilisi aristocracy was recognized, as I told you before, and was given the same rights, the same responsibilities and perks as the Russian nobility, and there was not really made any distinction. And the nobility actually loved this place and they liked the palace and they liked coming here. Obviously, they didn't have to like it genuinely. We don't know if they did, but many apparently did. Um, but we know that the parties that were held here were equally visited by Russians, by Georgians, and those were like really big parties and like some big political decisions were taken here. Well, there is a stage now. That's because during the Soviet times, the palace was uh, was made into a big kids hobby club. Well, it's kind of a collection of hobby clubs, like a hobby center. It was called the Palace of Pioneers. Now it's the Palace of the Young. And the stage was placed in the Soviet times. However, before that, this was a big hall, like a big conference hall, where, for example, the Constitution of Georgia was adopted, of the independent Georgia. And this is where 3 years before that, in 1918, Georgian independence was announced, and many other things, many other important political things political events took place in this very room. Also, in the early Soviet period, this palace became the residence of Ekaterina Geladze, who, as you know, happened to be mother of Joseph Stalin. And she lived in this particular room. That was her mirror. It was her rug. The bed and other items and other furniture did not survive, but those are the memorial items. The table used to be in that room, but the table was there during the 4 years that Ekaterina Geladze lived in the palace. No, actually 5 years, I think. Other than that, you wouldn't really find a lot of furniture. You wouldn't find a lot of memorial items in the palace because well, the very last viceroy left Georgia in 1915, and after that, when the Bolsheviks, well, when Georgia became independent from the Russian Empire, well, they still every all the furniture that was left here was used by the new Georgian government. This is, for example, the office of Nicholas II, right? And this is where, because Nicholas II would be staying in this palace during his visits. And, well, actually, amidst the First World War in 1914, Nicholas II did a big tour in the Caucasus. And Tbilisi was particularly important because Georgia borders on, still borders on with Turkey, and Turkey during Germany in the First World War, I mean the Ottoman Empire. So it was especially important to um, boost the morale, right, of the officers in the Caucasus. But then, okay, what happened to all these opulence, to all this furniture? In 25th on the 25th of February 1921, the Bolsheviks invaded, and the very first building they would come to in Tbilisi, after obviously having looted some monasteries on the way and other places, well, they of course invaded the palace, looted it, destroyed, well, took everything they could. They basically robbed the palace. Yeah, and after that, everything they could not take with them, they just destroyed, just smashed everything, including the mirrors in the White Hall. So speaking of Nicholas II, as I said, in 1914, in the November 1914, he visited. Thank you so much for the coffee, by the way. I'm not sure if you're here on the tour, but I'm just getting some tips for Grisha. So these are, I showed you these photos last time, so I'm not going to spend too much time going over them again, but I'm just sharing them to, it's just, I think, wouldn't hurt to see them again. Uh, well, there are some photos of the area of the palace and the area just around the palace to see what it looked like. And that's Nicholas wearing the traditional chokha, the military uniform. That's he visiting the museum just across the street from the Viceroy Palace. That's him visiting different army regiments. And this is the room that is also gone. That will never be restored. It was a small arsenal, like a small exhibition of the uh, Romanovs gun collection, arms collection, and it was all looted. A lot of it was taken to Russia, to Moscow, by the Bolsheviks. A lot of it was stolen and never really made it uh, to Moscow, but a lot was stolen. A lot was sold further on the auctions, and that's it. And after that, for many decades, the palace was given to kids for all sorts of kids, hobby clubs, kids activities, concerts. So obviously, the originals were never around. That's what's it. However, that being said, this vase and the plates, they are original, and they were found in storage in the basement. And these are the plates that were also used by the mother of Joseph Stalin while she was staying in the palace. The balcony, I told you the story, one of the stories of the park, which is still, well, the garden, not really a park, but it's a pretty big garden. It is not accessible at the moment, so Tbilisi is the Rustaveli Avenue is going to undergo really massive restoration, and it will reopen after that. But the photos are really good, and it looks like a beautiful garden, and it was a beautiful garden. Um, it was just a perfect place to get away from the heat. And obviously, the gardeners did a good job in creating the shade, and a lot of political decisions all the political decisions of the Viceroy General had to be coordinated with Moscow. but also a lot of private, visits, diplomatic visits, and talks would be given in the park. That we also know. The furniture is not original. It's not a museum, technically speaking. It's not a museum. So the furniture, it can be contemporary or just it might look like it's all old from the 19th century, but doesn't really have to. This is the staircase, and it's a gorgeous staircase. It looks just amazing, really, really, really impressive. And this is one of the this is the entrance for uh, the central entrance, because the museum entrance is from one of the wings, for the left wing of the palace. The central entrance is for kids that attend all these hobby clubs. And also through that staircase, you can actually walk into the garden, but well, we can't go to the garden now. Hopefully, after this massive restoration of the reconstruction of the Rustaveli Avenue, we will be able to see the park, walk in it, and just enjoy. So all these mirrors, it's like the room with I don't know how many mirrors there are. They just smashed the mirrors. That was it. I mean, the Bolsheviks. They what they could not take, like in one of the rooms, they couldn't take the chandelier. In the White Hall, they couldn't take the chandelier, so they just left it there. But many other chandeliers were just smashed by bats or whatever. And that was it, unfortunately. The style of this room is definitely, well, it's kind of the influence of the Moorish style. It's the influence of the Persian influence. And there is a lot of, in general, a lot of Turkish and Persian influence. That's because Tbilisi, for many years, for many centuries, these lands were under control of the two empires. And eventually, this is kind of the fusion of different architectural styles that we can see. But this is what the room looked like in the late 19th century. So that's the garden. Uh, it's just part of the garden. It's like the courtyard. It's the courtyard, and then you can access the garden, but you cannot. Uh, but technically, yeah, you can. So this area is not accessible for tourists. So the guards there are pretty strict, so it's not so easy to get there. Well, we'll see. Maybe later on I will be able to film it for you from the courtyard and maybe take it to the garden. So speaking of the viceroys, last time we spoke about the one of the first viceroy generals of the Vorontsov, right, Mikhail Vorontsov, who was who was very active and definitely did a lot for the development of the region, which still in many ways was underdeveloped, like in communication, the roads, and a lot of infrastructure was improved just so it would be good enough for the new capital city of the region. So a lot was done for the development, also the cultural life, all sorts of entertainment. That was done during the times of Mikhail Vorontsov, but there were also other viceroys that I wanted to talk about, not necessarily good things, right? So, there's I'm trying to be as objective as possible, as unbiased as possible. Well, for example, some of the viceroys were not really royal. They were just from aristocratic families, obviously. But they didn't have to be Romanovs to be there, to be on this position, but some of them were. Well, for example, there was Grand Duke Mikhail Nikolaevich. He was uh, like a grandfather to Nicholas II. Well, it's like uncle, great uncle. I'm not even sure what the term is. It's really difficult to translate. But actually, okay, so let's say he was a distant and highly respected uncle to Nicholas II, and that um, he was very conservative. He was very strict, very pro-Russian, and he was in charge of the Caucasus campaign in general, so the Caucasian campaign, right, which is expansion to the Caucasus and conquering other territories of the Caucasus. That's him. While his stay service in the Caucasus, he's wearing again the choha, the choha coat, right? The hat, the traditional hat, and he, he was the viceroy for decades. That was him, by the way, also inspecting the forces, the army. He he was strict, he was demanding, and he was merciless when it got to expansion and the wars, right? But again, so they saw it as a mission, right? I mean, they saw it. So we were saving the Caucasus from Muslim influence. That's exactly what the big part of the Russian-Turkish wars were about. Just making sure that the territories around Russia would not be influenced by the Islam countries. It was one of the ideas, but obviously many others. But kind of giving you the agenda that they had, but also okay, if you ask me, was there anything good that he did? Well, yeah, of course there was. For example, the Grand Duke opened the big resort called Borjomi, and Borjomi became a small, beautiful, charming town. And I will be going there in March, and I will be doing a live stream tours from Borjomi. It's just one of the buildings that you can find in the old city. It's a charming place. And there was opened the big mineral water resort, visited by the Romanovs, by the way. Not far from there, another Grand Duke Romanov built himself a residence, actually brother to Nicholas II. And a lot of Romanovs um, visited the place. So there are a lot of Romanov stories that we could share, and I will be doing that in March, in about a month from now. So, and that's what the modern Borjomi looks like. So yes, during the summer it's pretty crowded because it's one of the must uh, in, well, let's say if you travel around Georgia, if you don't only see Tbilisi, it's one of the places you really need to see. And there are a lot of places just around Borjomi to look around, including the resort itself. So that's Mikhail Nikolaevich. He spent decades in Tbilisi, and the Borjomi was a big project that took a lot of his energy. But speaking of the wars of the Caucasus, right? As a result, a lot of um, peoples in the Caucasus had to flee because they didn't want to to be made part of the Russian Empire. They wanted to be free, and that's what happened to a lot of Circassians. So the Circassians uh, didn't want to serve to the Romanovs, didn't want to serve to Russia, and they had to flee. So Circassians, they didn't live on territory of Georgia. They lived on other territories around in Dagestan and other areas. The areas of Chechnya and also the Adig Republic. So big part of the Caucasus region around Georgia, and eventually they decided to flee, and many of them found a good place in the Ottoman Palestine. So the Ottomans welcomed Circassians. They provided them with a place to stay. They granted them security, while Circassians had to pay. But in general, they became part of the diverse, I would say, the diverse population of Ottoman Palestine, right? So I reminded that Palestine is the name of the region, not the state, right? That was just part of the vast Ottoman Empire, and basically Circassians was a fraction, really a fraction of a percent of the population. So mainly made up of Ottoman Palestinian Jews, Christians, and also Arab Muslims and Arab Christians. That's how it worked. So Circassians were just a fraction. They normally settled in the north of in the northern regions, and after the Ottoman Empire collapsed, they stayed on the territories, and then they're still staying. They are citizens of the state. Well, they Israelis. They have citizenship of the state of Israel. They serve in the army, and they live in, like, there are two main cities in the north of Israel that that are known as the Circassian communities. Well, Kfar Kama is one of the places that uh, are often visited with tourists. Well, they are Muslims. They are Muslims, so that's one of the reasons they didn't want to stay. They didn't want to serve the Romanovs and be part of Russia. They well, that's why the Ottomans were welcoming to them. And this is the mosque that was built. Their architecture would be quite interesting. They would use local basalt stone, which is very dark. That sometimes gets like really really black, but it's mostly gray. And a lot of buildings in Karkama have the black contours or just interesting patterns. Like here, for example, because mainly in Israel, especially the central areas and also in Jerusalem, a lot of buildings would be the facades would be done with this with the local stone or Jerusalem stone that we call it. But in Kfar Kama and some certain areas in the north of the country, the basalt stone is found in greater volumes, and it's used a lot in the architecture, or at least in the decoration of facades. So Kfar Kama is an interesting place, and it's just another way to look at the diverse population. And the Circassian, so like the Choha, for example, you see, so the Circassian men are wearing the same garment, right, the same uniform. It was just basically widely worn throughout the Caucasus, uh, starting from the Middle Ages. But obviously, the Circassian Choha looks different from the Georgian Choha. There are differences, but you can see the similarities as well. You can see that. And there's one more viceroy that I wanted to talk about just a little bit. That would be Ilarion Vorontsov Dashkov. He happened to be the last viceroy, and he's he's due to finish the times of the second of the First World War, and after that there wasn't really much to control because the empire was done with, and the Romanovs were done with. But this was a challenging time. So the early 1900s in Georgia were also pretty challenging, especially from the point of view of like ethno-social conflicts. There were tensions between the Armenian community and Georgian community. There were tensions in the division of the different distribution of different fields of interest and economic spheres, different businesses. There were some tensions, and Mikhail Vorontsov Dashkov, his main goal was to be a facilitator to, well, it's kind of to mitigate the conflicts and minimize the consequences of the clashes that were there. But in general, he succeeded in this. He was very diplomatic. He was I would say pretty tolerant in general, and he his policy was not really on uh, let's say forcing Russian culture or anything on Georgians. No, it was just the idea. It was to kind of encourage the diversity, but also making sure it would be peaceful among different diverse ethnic groups. And He succeeded in many ways. However, the First World War just ruined his plans, and also his health was not the best. And eventually, he resigned from the position and passed away a couple of years later. Also, during the Soviet times, well, as I said, it was like a big hobby club, and the range of the hobbies and activities kids could enjoy was endless. There was anything from, let's say, painting, dancing, uh, some sports. There was also the like big archaeology club, and kids, well, not just children, but like young teenagers, young adults would be often going to, well, archaeological expeditions. They would take part in the actual archaeological expeditions. The classes would be done by archaeologists, and they would spend weeks in woods, in field, just digging and describing and putting everything into the catalogs. And this is just the findings that were made by children that attended that archaeology club. And well, I know I would have been in that club. I would have been in it. I know that. Maybe just once. Anyway, um, so as I told you last time, and I will repeat myself here, that unfortunately, many rooms were so badly damaged and there was no photographs, so we don't even know what the rooms looked like. And they are used as exhibition centers. And one of the hobby clubs that I didn't mention, I haven't mentioned yet, is the chess club. And I don't know how much you know about chess and what place Georgia has in the, let's say, world chess rating, but it's really impressive. You're looking at the table at which two Georgian women competed in the World Championship in 1975. It was Nana Prindashvili who eventually won. So Nana Kapridashvili was the first female international grandmaster and the first woman to become an international grandmaster in the men's category. Just imagine that she was like the star, like like it was like sensation, and she was the first woman to compete with men. And then she defended her title of the Grandmaster in that category too. That was a big deal. And I think I have mentioned it on one of the tours. So, but you probably remember the Netflix show, The Queen's Gambit. And um, well, the film claimed that the there were no women that played against men in the chess tournament, which was which was wrong because Nana Kabrandashvili did, and she actually sued Netflix. And in 2022 or 2021, Netflix settled and they changed a little bit the final version of the Queen Gambit, and that was like in the very end. And well, that's how Nana Gapridashvili was remembered again. So this is her playing against men, actually. So I mean, that was a really, 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 really big lie. And Nana Gapridashvili is still active, takes part at competitions, all sorts of tournaments, and she teaches kids how to play chess here in this very palace. And that table that she played at against another Georgian woman, by the way, Nana Alexandria. Uh, well, the chess table was in Nana Gaprindashvili's in Gaprindashvili's collection, and then she decided to give it as a present to the youth palace. Two Georgian women international chess tournament. Big time. So there was a very, very, very good school of chess. and in that Palace of Pioneers, that's how it was called back then, because we're talking about the Soviet period, whether we like it or not. That's the Soviet times. So there was a very, very, very big and very strong chess club here, yeah, in the Pioneers Palace. But that's not all. It's not just the two women. There was there's more than that. So, and I thought I would share it with you, which I think is just an amazing thing. And it's not really that well known, but it should be known. So I will share just a couple more names, like Maya Chuburdanidze, for example. So another champion, well, like she's the sixth women's world chess champion. So the big title that she was able to hold for actually many, many years. Well, I'm also I decided to just keep here a little bit of the bio from Wikipedia. So just have a look. So she held the title from 1978 to 1991 as the youngest right one, and that's just incredible. And yes, so she did take part in the Women's Chess Olympiad. That's her. So it's already three, but there's more. Believe it or not. And by the way, she's also still active. She still teaches kids and also takes part. Well, she's also a politician. So that's, I think, just an amazing museum exhibit. And also Nana Yaseliani, another world-known chess champion. It's exactly about women. Somehow, it's about women. In, let's say, there were a lot of Soviet Jews, men, that also um, won a lot of international chess championships. But for Georgia specifically, it was mostly women. Just have a look. Amazing. So that's throughout the Soviet times mostly. So this interesting, surprising history. You see these dolls, you see the paintings. So the dolls were made. Well, the dolls are the were made by the um, it was made by the children, but not just kids like of Grisha's age or younger, but like young adults that attend these hobby club. So this is the small exhibition, and also the paintings. The paintings that you see are were either made by by the kids that students, young people that attend the art classes, or also by the teachers. And a lot of the teachers are quite prominent local artists. Some of the artworks are also presents from them, and or presents from the from the patrons of the youth palace. Well, I'm not that familiar with these names. I'm more into how much I would say earlier period of Georgian art, but I find these works pretty curious. And there are just a few more things that I wanted to share with you before we wrap this up. So unfortunately, some other rooms are still not accessible to public, and it's highly unlikely that they will open its doors to us visitors in the near future, at least not in the next couple of years. By the way, what you could see just some more clay vessels that were found at the excavations. There are a lot of them. These are the photographs of the current uh, version of the building and the previous one. So I will just zoom it in for you. That's what it looked before 1960s revamping, and this is already by the version done by Arthur Simonson. So the house was rebuilt by the end of the 1860s, and it's been like this ever since. I think pretty recognizable. It looks pretty much the same now. Some more exhibitions. So they claim that actually they have pretty good collection of Georgian contemporary art, some the late Soviet period as well. Well, I've seen some paintings from 1870s, 18 well, 1970s, 1980s, quite a lot of them. And well, there we also saw some other rooms where like just kids' paintings were, which is cute. But here you see it's quite different, like really nice contemporary art. The windows from here, for example, are overlooking the parts of the garden that, well, that area is accessible to kids that study, well, that attend all these hobby clubs. I like this painting for some reason. I haven't really been able to find a good, well, a lot of information about the artist, well, 1917, but I just like the colors. And from from what I understand, when the big reconstruction of Rustaveli Avenue is over, the park will be open not just to the children, not just to those attending the hobby clubs, but just to everyone. And it will be a great location just in the center of Tbilisi, just green space. And I just can't wait for it to happen because I know it will be a special place with a lot of stories to share and just the unmatched vibe in general. So we are approaching the place where we started the tour, the main staircase. We started on the other side of it. And here, before we wrap this up, there are a few more things that, well, kids that attend these hobby clubs are into. Geology, natural, well, natural history. So this is also, well, these are the exhibitions. These are the items that were brought from different geological expeditions. Well, these are the corals that were found in the Black Sea. Uh, and I mean, they're just gorgeous, big, huge, and also all sorts of minerals that can be found on the territory of Georgia. And well, there are some names that I actually never heard at all. Well, yeah, well, we could see lazurite, but the amazonite, I have no idea what it is. No idea. I've never seen a stone like that. So in the previous tour that was done by me and my son, we took you to Ziuri Park, where in the center of the park there is a monument made from stones, all kinds of stones. Well, not all. There's big a variety that were found in Georgia and brought to Tbilisi, and each stone from from in that monument represents a certain figure, well, like an artist or a politician or a king or a warrior. Well, stones in general, well, because Georgia is a mountainous country, like I said, it's in the Caucasus, and Tbilisi is surrounded with the mountains, obviously play a big role, not just in the natural diversity, but in general in culture. So kids are still very much involved in uh, yes. So there is lapis, there is amazonite, but some of the stones I am not even familiar with. Well, of course I know quartz, but like what is galena, I have no idea. So it's kind of, and from what I understand, there are no archaeology clubs anymore. I guess it's just probably too costly and too complicated from the point of view of like real archaeology, I guess. Well, and I'm not sure if there is still any geology like club or geology enthusiasts can join the expeditions. I don't know that, but I also hardly doubt. But it was way more. I would say it was on a much bigger scale back in the Soviet times. I just reckon they had probably a bigger budget to do this, but it is functioning, and many generations of Belizeans well, spent their formative years in this building. And I think it's just amazing that, let me go back here to look at the facade once again. I think it's really the best to enjoy the facade. A second. Yeah, okay. Let's start from here. I think it's just really the best location because kids, well, not only they, not only, well, do they get educated. They always learn something new here, but they get to study in this beautiful setting, surrounded with, columns, beautiful staircases. I reckon there is at least something preserved in some of the interiors that we were not able to access. Again, we're just all waiting for the garden to reopen, probably next year, but you never know. They were supposed to start the renovations of the Rustaveli Avenue like earlier this year, like January this year, and they haven't started yet. So I think it might not happen in the next couple of years even. But so we're done with the Viceroy Palace. However, we are not done with Tbilisi architecture and Tbilisi palaces. So next time I haven't decided yet, but I will either be taking you to another palace that also happens to be an educational facility, or I'll be taking you to a beautiful mansion in the heart of the 19th century area to tell you the story of one of the richest families, of one of the most successful businessmen in the Russian Empire. But I will see. I will keep you posted. I'm sorry, I haven't had time to schedule the next tour yet, but I will. And I'm going to share once again what I have been able to schedule. Um, and I'm pretty sure that, well, this place, so the Viceroy Palace, looked way more impressive. I mean, the other rooms were just must have looked just as impressive. Okay, let me rephrase it. I'm pretty sure that all the rooms that we have not been able to see, or all the rooms that don't have any interior decoration now, they looked amazing. I'm pretty sure. But unfortunately, thank you, Bolsheviks, thank you, Soviet government and Soviet times that couldn't care less about that. Unfortunately, what can I say? But I'm happy that the palace is still for kids and their families, and I'm happy that there's still a lot of funding, and a lot of those hobby clubs are, by the way, free of charge, or you know, well, families and kids have to pay very little, and it's affordable to everyone. Obviously, well, some clubs are more expensive, some are just free of charge, some just you need to pay like 10% or like 40% of the entire price. I think it's a good idea. I'm happy that it's still there, and I hope that the place will prosper. And well, obviously, the money that we pay for visits, for guided tours, well, that they will be used to maintain this gigantic palace and maybe run some other activities for kids, which would be really great. So this is it. Let me know if you have any questions. So in 20 minutes from now, I will be greeting you in Jerusalem in the Armenian Quarter. We're going to see the areas that are not generally visited and accessed by tourists, but guides can access it with prior arrangements and everything. And I have scheduled some more tours for the upcoming weekend. So, such as, well, the final episode of the Rubenstein Street, we're going to visit the communal apartment, which happened to be home to one of the biggest dissident writers of the Soviet times, Sergei Dovlatov, who eventually immigrated to the States and became famous already. Well, it became famous Russian writer outside of Russia. Yeah, but he became a big celebrity. Then I'm taking you for another episode of the Anichkov Palace, the Romanov Palace in St. Petersburg, the one that is the Anichkov Palace is really rarely visited, so it's kind of a local gem and definitely off beaten. Then on the 1st of March, we are going to have just one more, the last episode of the Armenian Quarter of Jerusalem tour. We are heading to the Museum of Armenian History for, well, quite a lot of amazing facts. So, and I'm going to be sharing some more facts with you tonight, of course. Thank you, Dolores. Thank you. Thank you, Dolly. You like palaces, furniture, and artifacts from times gone by. Beautiful. Yeah, well, obviously this palace feels Well, it I have kind of a bit of a mixed feel. I mean, definitely, we know it's an old place, and well, at least some artifacts are there, at least some memorial items are there, which is great. But also, it's just reopened. It's just opened after this renovation, restoration, and it feels like it's new. Also, it feels a little bit empty, but it's not a museum, technically speaking. They don't really so they don't promise you anything. However, well, you see some things that belong to Stalin's mother, all the old porcelain that belonged to Vorontsov Dashkov, and that later on would be used by Stalin's mom and Stalin himself when he visited. Oh, well, it's still a beautiful place. The mirror hall is impressive. Dolores, thank you so much for the tip. So it's still a good place to enjoy. It's still a good place to visit. And well, it's in the heart of Tbilisi. It's one of the symbols of the Rustaveli Avenue. So it's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. And I'm going to leave here also links to my website. There are still some more tours scheduled. Some links for the recordings as of yesterday are already there. I managed to do this, and a lot more is going to be scheduled around these days. My schedule is likely to change a little bit because I will need to adjust it accordingly, since Misha will be busy many weekends. But it's going to be there. I'm not leaving you without the tours. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you in 20, a little less than 20 minutes from now in Jerusalem. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Stalin's mom? No, she didn't have a mustache. No, she didn't. Well, we did talk about her last time. We talked about their relationship. It was really, well, she had a difficult life, and she was a tough woman. So things could have been very different, but it happened the way it happened. What can I say? Thank you so much, everyone. Also, thank you for your support. Thank you for your tips, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.